Could you briefly describe the company and walk me through your role and responsibilities?
Sure. My name is Ravin Mirchandani, and I'm the Chairperson of Ador Powertron. We are a power electronics company, so we focus really on the energy transition sector. So that's EV chargers. We also make power sources for hydrogen electrolyzers. We make equipment for anybody that manufactures, designs, tests batteries. And we are probably India's largest traffic road safety technology company today.
Ador Powertron operates in a space where industrial customers prioritize both technological advancement and uncompromising reliability.
Good question that I would have to answer if you were a private equity house or a venture capital. One of the things that we are fortunate with is being a 120-year-old company. I represent the fourth generation of people that are managing this business. We have the opportunity sometimes to go with instinct and sometimes to go with where you feel the market will go. In 2021, it was very evident that the market for all of our sectors is moving to the energy transition sector. So whether it was batteries moving from lead acid to lithium, cars moving, or buses also moving from ICE engines to electric vehicles, and also power and backup power for most applications were moving towards renewable, which meant that hydrogen was going to get a Guernsey, should I say. And so we took the big punt, actually, and we invested in 3 technologies all at the same time in 2021. And if I was going to a private equity house or a venture capital company, I wouldn't be able to justify this on a spreadsheet. Except to tell you that the question is a good one, right? How do you mix commercial discipline and growth profitably at the same time? And it's a hard one. I would only tell you that in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, and even up to 10 years ago, you had to be one of 3 things. You had to either be cheaper and faster, or faster and better, but you didn't need to be cheaper, faster, and better. And what China showed us in post-corona, when they came out of their big lockdown in 2023, was they were cheaper, faster, and better at everything that they did, ahead of Europe, ahead of America. And so if you're going to scale something, and if you're going to invest in something, and you are talking about sustainability, with sustainability meaning profits, make sure that you're doing all 3.
How do you balance investment with the commercial discipline needed to scale sustainably? What indicators tell you that a new design, technology platform, or digital control system is ready to move from engineering validation into customer deployment at scale?
You know, that's an interesting one. And I remember back in the 90s when I met people from Airtel, and I said, how do you make your strategic plans? The answer that came back from them was, well, the strategic planning department seems to work on their own, and we just go out and get shit done. And the world has almost become like that. I think you have to tactics drive strategy. And you cannot wait for your product to be ready before you go out to market. And a good example is WhatsApp, right? WhatsApp was never as good as BlackBerry Messenger. Still today, 20 years later, BlackBerry Messenger is a better product, but you're using WhatsApp. Because they came out fast, they iterated, they got the maximum number of people that were their subscriber base. So what tells you that your product is ready? I think you need the first mover advantage today. And your customers will forgive you if you fail because you got out quickly, but they won't forgive you if you are late. Because somebody else has already taken the place. So I don't think you have the luxury to go, have I finished my engineering validation and can I get the product out? You just have to get it out there. Now customers will say, have you got your approvals? Have you got certification? Have you got testing? And for the most I've noticed, customers will actually be willing to accept to start using you as you are getting the certification and testing. The market is moving, in our sector anyway, the market is moving far too quickly for us to talk about, let's get the proto, then the design, then the testing, then the commercial readiness and get it out there. That's how Ford used to take 4 years to get a car out, and BYD does it in 9 months, right?
Many innovations in power electronics and pollution control systems have long testing and qualification cycles. How do you keep the innovation pipeline strong while delivering near-term business outcomes?
The example I'll give you is EV chargers. You're supposed to get your design validated. You're supposed to get ARAI approval or CE approval or UL approval for America. And yet, when we have a product ready, most customers will be willing to give you a pilot site for you to get out on the road, get it ready, get it market validated before you get the testing and certification. So you almost have to do it concurrently today. Now, if you're in the aviation industry or transport industry, it's a different ballgame, clearly, because you can't have a vehicle on the road unless it's tested. But yet in the environment that we're in, it's moving so fast. If you're actually going to wait for those steps, by the time your product's ready, the competitors have already launched another one. For example, the 30 kilowatt converter, India's first AC DC converter, everybody imports from China, including the Europeans, ABB, Siemens, Schneider, they all import from China. We are the company that designed and manufactured India's first converter. It took us 24 months, and we were impatient through the process, and yet as soon as we launched, the Chinese had launched a 40 kilowatt and a 50 kilowatt. So you do not have the luxury to take your time through this process. You have to muddle your way through it, and you have to, what is the Indian word? Jhail lenge, pata nahi kaise, lekin jhail lenge, ho jayega. You have to go on with that attitude for any sort of innovation, and work concurrent work streams at the same time. Now, I'm sure there's many people watching this going, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because it is industry specific. In our industry, I think because technology is moving so quickly, quite like telecom, say, in the 90s, the entire industry sector is willing to put up with work streams working concurrently. Innovation working concurrently with testing, working concurrently with certification.
How do you maintain trust and brand credibility when performance, uptime, or environmental compliance may be affected by external factors beyond your control?
10 years ago, we asked a number of our customers why they do business with us. And the word that kept coming back, the two words in Hindi that we kept coming back to were Nishchint and Bharosa. And therefore today the tagline under our logo says peace of mind. When we first launched it, a lot of people asked us if we were some yoga business or a wellness retreat. But the peace of mind came from the fact that we never let our customers down, and therefore they gave us business. Now, what does that mean, never let your customers down? Does it mean that you have the most cost-effective product, or the fact that you have the fastest delivery, or the fact that you had competent people that came in and commissioned it, or that you provided them service when it went, when the equipment failed? For the most, it is all of those. But what does Bharosa mean to a customer? It doesn't mean your equipment doesn't fail. And that's the bit that I want to stress, because equipment design in India will always have issues, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way. If you think of the journey of Japan and Korea, Japan in the 60s, Korea in the 80s, China, in the last decade, that was the journey of improvement. You have quality issues as you go up the value chain, and we are in that journey and that cycle right now. So what does it mean for the customer? It means that when the equipment fails, you are there to sort it out. So today for us, our secret sauce on one end is very rapid innovation, but on the other side, it's making sure that the customer never feels let down and we are able to service or over-service them. So in the EV charger industry, for example, it could be 4 to 12 hours in response time, and in other locations, it could be 24 hours to resolution if you're a battery factory or if you're a hydrogen electrolyzer.
How important is narrative building around safety, reliability, indigenous capability, and technological leadership in shaping Powertron's position in a competitive market?
The Indian customer rewards one thing only, and that is to be the cheapest and the most cost-effective product. Any other narrative does not matter. I mean, we want to say make in India, but if the Chinese is cheaper, all the acquisition goes there, and that happens even to government tenders where they say no Chinese allowed, because some Indian company will pretend it's Indian, designed with a sticker in India, and tested in India, and sold as an Indian product. So yes, our narrative is reliability, our narrative is resilience and made in India. But I have to tell you, my very big lesson has been, if you are not cost effective, that narrative means nothing. So work your innovation to design to cost, work your innovation to make sure that you are still competitive against the Chinese at their landed price. And then if the government is magnanimous enough to give you a fortress to protect you with some trade barriers that allows you a level playing field, then that's a bonus, but that's not your reason for existence.
As a supplier to both public sector and private sector clients, how do you navigate differing expectations around risk, performance guarantees, and life cycle support?
So our traffic business does a lot of government business. For the most, we do only private business. I do have to say, if you take the context of India, it is a very unique skill set to be able to deal with government or public sector businesses. So I want to separate direct government business from public sector, right? We do private and public sector businesses, but direct government business is a complete different ballgame. And I think you'll find that a lot of large Indian conglomerates will normally shy away from doing direct business with government because they do not have the skill sets, and I would put us in the same in the same ballpark. We don't really have what it takes to do direct business with government. It's a completely different mindset, different attitude, different skill set, particularly to get your money out. When it comes to private and public sector today, I think the private sector has gotten so big. Whether you look at the Adanis, Ambanis, Tatas, they don't behave very differently from the public sector. They also have their own tenders. They have their own negotiation, methodologies, and they've kind of taken a lot of people from the public sector as well. So, the behavior is not very different. And there, of course, there's complex sets of hoops, which are about your ability to be certified, your proven track record, and finally your cheapest price. So, how do we navigate the differences between the two? I'd say 70% of our business today is either the very large Indian conglomerates or the public sector units. The smaller businesses in India, which comprise 30% of our revenues. Perhaps the biggest challenge there is them being cash constrained. And so, in the Indian context, you're forced to give open credit, and therefore you spend a lot of time following up to make sure that you get paid. And that's one of the disadvantages of being in the industrial sector and the B2B business in India. Cash is something that you're always going to be chasing, unlike B2C, where you get a lot of your money up front.
How are geopolitical shifts and import dependency influencing your localization strategy and vendor development priorities?
It's a very good question. And, that one word meant nothing, geopolitics, and now it's in the boardrooms every day. Every meeting you're talking about geopolitics, and really let's define what geopolitics means. It is, what is Trump going to do and what is she going to do, because there's some severe destabilization going around in the world. So we had equipment that was being shipped to America that got hit with tariffs, and between the time it left Bombay and got to the port in New York, we'd already had 50% tariffs, right, and we had to pay the difference. So the government of India has been trying to negotiate this trade deal, hoping that it'll come back down to something like 20 or 25%. You could have China take Taiwan. What does that mean to global supply chains? It's all mind-boggling and really hard to pinpoint. And when we make our business models, you model what's going to happen if your bill of material costs increase. What happens if your margins are squeezed? What happens if competition if competitive pressures from China reduce your prices by half? But it's very difficult to model what will happen if Taiwan's taken or Greenland's taken or tariffs of 50% don't come down. You're just going to have to live with it. So how do we deal with that? On one side, we're trying to maximize our value chain coming from India, which is why we designed our own converters, right? Whether it's for EV chargers, whether it's for hydrogen, or even for battery manufacturing, the AC, DC power converters, which everybody imports from China, we have localized completely. The ICs still need to come from China, and that will be the case until the Indian fabs start. That's just the reality. And if there's a collapse, there's a collapse, much like Corona. There's not much you're going to be able to do from in a scenario like that. That's a black swan event, and I just hope the next 1,000 days is not going to have one of those, so that we can get across the bridge to when India can be Atmanirbhar on the electronic circuitry. Beyond that, I think our focus right now is in operating in environments where we have some stability, or where there is a fortress. And what does that mean? Well, stability is India for us, because the Indian industrial context can be forecast. The government behaves in a rational way, and what the market's going to grow at. The GDP is going to grow somewhere between 6 to 7.5 to 8%, and so you can forecast a lot of things. So our focus really is on India, and suddenly isn't about let's try and grow in Europe, let's try and grow in America. Those are bonuses suddenly rather than the key thrust areas for this business. It is very difficult to commit investments to sales. International business development is not cheap. There's expensive exhibitions, there's people that you need to hire, there's travel costs, there's warehousing, there's all sorts of things. It's very difficult in the context that we are in today in 2026 to commit to those sorts of resources and investments when there is absolutely no visibility of what the world's going to hold. Having said that, I don't think we are in a bad place to capitalize on any opportunity that arises should the world suddenly come back to sensibility, should trade deals be signed with Europe and the US, which allow a participation of Indian companies. I want to touch on another point though, and that is India competitive against China? We have proven yes. In our industry, we have proven yes. Do they make more margins? Definitely. But can we exist at the prices they sell at? Yes. When we try to sell in Europe, one of the problems we have is there is this perception that Indian quality is poor and unreliable, and therefore we have the extra mile to go to ensure that a European business would give their order to us. More often than not, their perception could be true because that is their experience. But the second thing is, they also have this apprehension that they don't want to create another China. They just did that 20 years ago. They don't want to create another China with India. There is a conversation to be had in India if we do want to be a global player, if we do want China plus one to happen, if we do want India to be a common sentiment in boardrooms around the world for doing business, then there is a PR job for us as industry and for government, right? To change the perception of India from being poor quality to reliable and resilient, and from this apprehension of creating another China to actually developing a partner that is a pillar of the global economy and the pillar of global sensibility, should I say. And that's a conversation we're not having in India today.
Are customers pushing harder for self-reliance, especially in pollution control systems and EV charging infrastructure? How is Powertron aligning with this shift?
India's problems are complex and everybody tries to simplify them into one thing. So, Delhi's pollution was blamed on Punjab because they had a different government and so they were burning fires. And the truth is it's a complex web, right? How do you sort out Delhi's pollution? How would a 101 student in pollution control sort it out? You'd go to the basics. There's 330 million vehicles registered on the road in India today. 82% are two-wheelers and three-wheelers. So where is your pollution coming from? 82%. 12% are trucks and buses. And the balance 6% are cars. And we're focusing on the cars. The cars have, Bharat 6 engines, right? It's the rickshaws, the scooters, and the trucks that we need to focus on if you want to clear Delhi's air. The first thing, the government's doing it right? Move all the intracity buses to electric. If that model works, move all of the delivery for the trucks to electric as well, right? Anything that's operating within the NCR, why couldn't you move to electric? You could have the same scheme, for these last mile delivery trucks, which are the real polluting ones, to move to electric. This is the first year, 2025, where a overwhelming majority of rickshaws being sold in India were electric already versus ICE. So, why can't we make that 100%? What regulations, policies need to be promulgated that makes that happen in Delhi? And then finally, what can we do with two-wheelers? How can you be stringent and say, I'm sorry, if your two-wheelers are more than 5 years old, you can't re-register it? Or what can you do to incentivize a complete change to electric? The grid is not the problem. There isn't an issue with getting the opportunity to charge, and if there is, as the demand grows, it's completely addressable both by the grid as well as industry to be able to service it without being extortionist. The problem beyond that is fuel for food, right? In the old days, a lot of people were using twigs and wood to cook food, and that was addressed in the last 10 years with the gas scheme of the government. But that, did that percolate to within 600 kilometers of Delhi is the question you need to ask. And then finally, what do you do with the burning of the farms for the harvest, which is a habit that they have in Indonesia. Singapore suffers from it once a year when you've got the burning going on in Indonesia. So, you have to address this pollution issue at multiple levels. And finally, the bit that no one talks about, and that's the dust that's created by all of this massive construction that is going on, whether it's cement roads or buildings, and that has to be addressed in a way too. So the manufacturing of cement is very adequately addressed through the electrostatic precipitator, and there's these very stringent rules on cement companies to make sure that they are not emitting a lot of dust, particulates into the air when they make cement. And yet, the moment you get to a construction site, all of that is gone, and all this dust, whether it's roads or buildings, is being created. Bombay is full of dust today because of that whole Navi Mumbai development with the road, the airport, and cutting off all the hills. So you have to look at this holistically, but we tend to look at it in a piecemeal manner, and therein lies the pollution problem of India.
Looking back, what key lessons would you share with your peers?
Actually, the lesson that I'm sharing is one that I learned. I learned it listening to Rajiv Bajaj, who talked about his lesson in the electric vehicle world was it is better to be wrong than late. And that's a lesson that we have really taken to heart in our business. Customers will not forgive you if you are late to the market. You will always be number 3 or number 4, even 20 years later, trying to catch up with the number 1. But if you go first, you go early, you're willing to take the risk of innovation, and your product is not perfect, quite like WhatsApp, customers will reward you. And WhatsApp versus Telegram, what do you use? It's the same thing. So my biggest advice in this world where it's changing so quickly, that whole mentality of let me iterate sequentially and get a product out, it will not reward you. And if you want to look at the strife that Europe is in, Germany and France, for example, these are countries that work sequentially on any innovation, on any development. Versus you look at what's happening in China, where they work concurrently and get out a product that might not be perfect, but in iterations becomes so. Today, BYD ride quality, it is in fact way better than a Tesla, right? But that was not the case 5 years ago. So the only advice I would give you is better to be wrong than late. Get out there, make the mistake, iterate, and get on with life, and you'll be forgiven by the customer, and you'll keep your number 1 position.